Well, good evening. Good evening. This is another episode of Better Together Conversations, where we address a topic that can be potentially divisive and show how the topic can actually unify us. You know, with the coronavirus kind of still spreading, running wild, and with racial tension running high, and the political tension is still on our minds, as you know, we're still battling and dealing with the election results even a month later, with Christmas right around the corner. You know, again, people have lost their jobs or been furloughed. Listen, these ingredients are like they're perfect ingredients for a an anxiety cocktail. And so that's what we're here to do tonight. We're here to talk about anxiety and how we can manage anxiety during this time. And so, man, I love the fact that we're talking about this topic, because there are so many people that are dealing with anxiety and stress, and maybe not even know that they are, and didn't know that there were tools out there to assist and to help us. Well, we have our very own Steve Halsell, and Steve is a licensed psychotherapist and licensed professional counselor. And you might remember a number of years ago, we had a conversation on mental health. And so Steve did a fantastic job helping us to understand mental health and the Christian mental health in the church. And so when we were going to talk about this issue, couldn't think of a better person to help us walk through this time than my good friend
I probably
Steve.
could, but
Oh, you could. Oh, you could. Okay, all right. So he is.
Yes.
He's being modest here. Being modest. I love humility. So Steve, welcome to another episode of Better Together. Now, listen, to lighten the mood just a little bit, I understand that you have a special talent. We're gonna get to you introducing your family and
It's
kind
like
of
SNL or something.
we're gonna get to you introducing your family and all of that good stuff. But I understand you have a special talent, that you can beatbox. And you said walking through the streets of Philadelphia, you picked this up. Now, this is a risk on my part, right?
Yeah, I'm next to a black guy here trying to rap in his house. I
Oh,
don't know if this is
no,
gonna work out too well.
that wasn't the
Man.
risk I was talking about.
Yeah.
That wasn't the risk. The risk I
This
was
could go
talking
badly.
about is we're in the midst of the coronavirus, and I'm asking you now to beatbox.
Spit
Like I
all over you.
spit all
Yeah,
over
spit
the
all over you.
place,
All right.
and so I'm gonna move just to the
All right.
side a little
Okay.
bit.
Yeah.
And so, can you just give us just a tad bit?
But you got to give me some like or something. You know.
Okay, I
You
like.
gotta, you gotta,
Okay,
maybe
I
you
wish
just
my
do a little freestyle.
no, no, no,
For
no, no.
some-
No, you're the beatbox. So, all right. So, no, I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you roll on your own. This is solo here. I know this probably is causing a little anxiety, but
Okay.
you're a counselor. You can
Okay.
handle it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
All right.
Right.
So go ahead. You got the. Uh, 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 uh. Oh my man! Look at it. Listen, he is a counselor, a
I used to
professional.
be.
Okay.
Lost my
So,
job now.
so now, yeah, that's right. He's lost his job, and now he's gonna go out on the street and beatbox for money. So listen. This, thank you. That was pretty cool. I like that. Now listen. We started that way. You can still trust him. All right,
Okay.
you can still trust him. He is a licensed professional counselor who does beatboxing on the side.
Right.
So, but again, Steve, welcome. In all seriousness, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your family and your career.
Yeah, I hail from Buckeye country, so some people may not like me already. Yeah, I met my wife in Philadelphia in fall of '98, and we were doing inner city ministry for Tony Campolo there. And we've been married for over 19 years, and we have 4 kids ranging from almost 14, 11, 5, and 2. And yes, I look a little old for having kids that young, but hey, keeping me young, right? So there they are gathered around the Christmas tree. So yeah, 19 years of marriage, 4 kids. I've been a counselor now since 2007.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, we're talking about this issue because I want to dive right in. We're talking about this issue because it is I think it's appropriate during this season. Everyone, the collective humanity, has been dealing with the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And not just the virus itself, but the stress that goes along with the virus. We talk about, the on again, off again, like the governor gave us orders several weeks ago. And we all thought, okay, this is going to be a, at least we have Christmas. That's like in the summer, this is what I was saying in the summer, at least we have Christmas. And this will all be over and we'll be able to celebrate Christmas like we once did. And we find out that that's not necessarily the case. So we have that. We have racial tension. We have the political fallout. Again, stress. Christmas brings its own stress, and then not to mention all of the other stuff, our own personal stuff. So, as a counselor, how have you handled this situation? With all the stuff swirling around, how have you handled it?
Yeah. Are you talking somewhat on a personal basis or me in my counseling role?
Yeah, let's go both. Let's go you personally, but then because I know you're talking to people all the time, and you're human just like everyone else. The counselor is human, the preacher is human, and we deal with it because our transformation in health actually is helpful to other people. So how have you handled it personally, and then how have you handled it as a counselor?
I mean, certainly people can come to me with lots of things that I'm not immersed in at that time. Coronavirus, I'm immersed in that. We are in solidarity as a culture on abrupt changes, and people don't generally handle changes very well, especially if they're abrupt and they're constant. And I think especially when we don't really have an out date. We don't know. It's kind of this nebulous dangling carrot that's always ahead of us, this cloud, and so that's normally like our kids, for instance, they were in school and they were not going to be in school. They were going to be online, and it seemed like at the 11th hour, everybody's trying to figure out like who are we supposed to ask about where our kids are going to be. And my wife, she comes into the December, and she's giddy about having the whole year planned out for the next year, and it's like everything's so tentative, right?
Yeah.
And so things are hanging to balance for a lot of people, and so I actually personally I came into this year. I don't always do a New Year's resolution, but I came into this year and my goal was, maybe it was just one of those middle-aged things where I'm like, yeah, I want to learn how to do more stuff. So I came into this year and I was like, I want to try to learn how to do something different each month. I mean, like concepts and things like that, playing music, things like that. Maybe I could work on those too, but I wanted to learn how to do more stuff. And so I started off, I was going to try to do each month, I was going to try to learn how to do something. I had no idea coming into this year how important a goal like that was going to be.
Sure. Yeah.
Because, I'm hearing from a lot of people like, well, we finally build our own deck, or they couldn't hire people to come to their house. And they're like, well, I guess we have to figure it out, And,
Right.
And so people have come together and tried to figure things out, and they're cooking together. And so there have been actually good and bad for my family as well as a lot of other people's families. I mean, most of what not to minimize or invalidate how the gravity of the negative of it, but a lot of people have found different and new things to do and have spent more time together. I've heard people say, we were so busy and that was the norm, and that's American life and that's what we do. And now our life is so slow, and that's not such a bad thing. And we're in each other's face all the time, but in a way, that's a good thing too. We play cards, we play Yahtzee, we do the stuff that we never really did except when we were on camping trips, right?
Yeah.
And so in the counseling season, the tax man might be like late March and early April. He's really busy. Like for me, usually about this time, mid-fall, is where like the seasonal affective disorder comes down. People aren't getting their vitamin D. They're going to be around family at the holidays, and they have a lot to think about. Grandma's not here with us anymore, or whatever it is. And that's usually when it picks up. But I've been pretty busy this year. There's been a lot for me to do.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely seeing more stress and anxiety for people.
Yeah. Well, so now and now we'll kind of dive in a little bit, because it's a great segue. You obviously there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. So let's ask the question. Some people again just may not know what is stress, what is anxiety, what is fear, what is worry, and how do we define that? And so again, here's a football, right?
Yeah.
So what is what is anxiety, and can we use all of these words synonymously?
Yeah, we can. I think if you were to look it up in a thesaurus, you're probably going to see them all synonymous. And in our everyday life, they are basically the same thing. There is a difference between anxiety and an anxiety disorder.
Okay, what's the difference?
And so for instance, anxiety is actually kind of an ally to us. I mean, I don't know why we have this idea that our feelings are somehow kind of an enemy or something we have to get rid of, because those feelings indicate things. They're like idiot lights on our dashboard that help us to realize. Like,
did you just call me an idiot?
No, not
okay,
you.
all right.
That's for after the show.
Oh,
but anyway.
Okay.
No, but the idiot lights of your dashboard of your life, or those emotions, they're there to indicate something that we need to address and we need to solve. And we can ignore those lights if we want to, but they're gonna have their way with us. Anxiety is actually a mechanism. If we were to take our brain and give it 3 elevator floors, the first floor of that elevator stop would be basically what we'd call the primitive brain, what scientists call the primitive brain. It's the stuff we don't have to think about, like heartbeat, breathing, balance, things like that. I'm glad I don't have to stop and think about heartbeat, because I'd be dead a long time ago. anything I have to stop and think about, it probably would have been dead by now. But and then the second floor is really your limbic system, your fight, flight, or freeze response, and it's absolutely necessary. Like if you and I were to go to a gas station and say we're near Potter Park Zoo and somebody approaches us in the parking lot and says, you guys realize that a lion has escaped from Potter Park Zoo and is still at large. It would be perfectly natural for us to sort of back our way to the car, spanning the scene, getting in the car, locking the doors, and driving off. And that's how we would survive.
Sure.
We have a mechanism for survival. When it becomes a disorder, it's, looking at my notes for a second, anxiety becomes a disorder when the symptoms become chronic and interfere with our daily lives and ability to function.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's really our ability to function.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, and we believe that God has created us, we are image bearers. We are created in the image of God. So in a sense, anxiety, God has given us anxiety as a gift to help us to survive, or to help us to protect our family, or to protect ourselves in a pretty dangerous situation. Would that be an accurate statement to say that it's a gift?
I think so. Yeah, and there are people who say, well, Bible tells us not to have anxiety, or they'd say, well, there's 400 verses about fear, but I don't ever sense the tone that we're being screamed at about that.
Yeah.
It's something that is pretty normal to our experience to be afraid, and you can see Jesus sweating blood at Gethsemane. It's a normal human experience, and it's an indicator to us about something that we need to look at.
Yeah, very good. Hey, everybody, we're here with Steve Halsell, a licensed professional counselor, and we are diving in our Better Together conversation, talking about anxiety that comes from, not only the coronavirus, the racial tension, the political unrest, all of these things that we're dealing with. So we're here having a conversation with our good friend Steve about this very, very important topic of anxiety. All right, Steve, so let me ask another question. So where does anxiety come? Like what's the origin? We're talking about anxiety versus the anxiety disorder. So from where does it come?
Yeah. So part of the answer is that part of the brain that we that it's there to warn us of things. As far as a disorder, people can have a genetic predisposition to that. Usually I can explore people's family and we can see indicators of anxiety in the family. Certainly people can have childhood experiences that were really adverse. Huge research in the mid-90s, Kaiser Permanente and the CDC put some of their data together. They realized that there were so many correlations between any kind of health issue, mental health issue, physical health issue, addictions, with adverse childhood experiences where people had, over a span of time, experienced chronic, inescapable stress. And so that can make people susceptible, because when we're really young and undeveloped, we don't know what this stuff is. These feelings, they come at us and they're so strong, and we don't know how to deal with them. Maybe we grew up in an environment with it. People don't know how to deal with their own feelings. We don't know how to deal with our feelings. There's invalidation, further wounding, further trauma. It's just a snowball effect. And the research says that a lot of people have a shorter longevity, or more susceptible to any number of things. There's actually a scale, a questionnaire you can look up. It's ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it has a resilience test that goes along with that to say, how do people survive these kinds of things? These variables help them to survive. So there's traumatic events, stressful events from childhood. But here we are in the middle of this quarantine. Abrupt changes happening to our lives. Sometimes really big ticket changes are happening.
Like job loss.
Job loss, exactly. Somebody said to me early on, did you hear that the divorce rate was up 30% since the quarantine? And I thought, I haven't seen the study, but I can believe that. It's putting a lot of stress on people. I probably would have believed it just as much as somebody said, not that it's very measurable to put it this way, but that marriages improve 30%
Yeah.
just the same, just because being with each other sometimes is what we needed in the first place.
Yeah, I like that. So our default is to always go to the negative. At least maybe it's my default to go to the negative. But I heard that was just such a refreshing thing to hear, that the improvement of marriages by 30%. We don't talk about that. We talk about the divorce rate. We talk about the abuse that's happening, as opposed to fathers who are actually spending time with their sons and daughters, husbands and wives who are actually taking long walks together that they probably would not have done before. They're cooking together, those kinds of things. So that's really cool. So when we talked earlier, you talked about stress over a long period of time produces anxiety. So talk to us a little bit about this idea of stress over a long period of time.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, we had a huge 65-gallon fish tank, and we set it on top of an old RCA console TV, which had the record player in it.
I really don't. I don't know.
Right. You're not that old, right?
I'm the one with the white hair, right?
But anyway, so we're sitting in the living room watching TV, and suddenly we hear this explosion, and there are fish flopping all around us, and there's like 3 or 4 inches of water at our feet because this thing had burst. It had been sitting on that console at such an angle, or it wasn't very level underneath it for very long, and that pressure on that glass just burst that glass.
Wow.
I think of another where when I worked at summer camp, and one of the corporal punishments they gave us was to hold pop cans out to the side and see how long we could do it. And we thought we were cool, we could do it forever, but we didn't know that much about lactic acid. So I mean, a little bit of stress over a long span of time, can break the dam, can break us down, and we understand that in the physical world. It's true in our mental health world too. And so when I talk about chronic, inescapable stress, in a way, that's what we're at as a world right now.
Yeah, that's a helpful concept to think about. So would it be advantageous for us to recognize where is the stress coming? Because if you say this is stress over a long period of time, and we may not even know how to recognize stress, little or not over a long period of time. So how do we even begin to recognize that we are under a lot of stress?
Yeah, I think if there's a redemptive, benefit from this period of time, we have to look at things. We have to make changes. We kind of don't have a choice. And some people who've been living with anxiety their whole life are finally showing up at counseling because it's really kind of put them over the edge,
Yeah.
And some people who are sort of new to this whole anxiety thing and don't know what to do with it, they're, freshmen, they're trying to find their bearings. And so,
So the source of stress. What are stressors that we can identify and recognize, so that if I know that something is showing up physiologically, something is showing up emotionally, I can pinpoint and say, whoa, that's a stressor, or that's a trigger that's causing stress. And if I hold on to this stress over a long period of time, it's going to cause anxiety. So how do I even begin to recognize what are the stressors in my life?
Well, we live in an age where, within 2 seconds, I can get into Google and I can look at psychcentral.com. I can look at psychologytoday.com, and I can find out all kinds of information. There's an exhaustive list about what anxiety looks like. That, the longer I am a clinician, the more I pick up on its subtleties. And, physiological symptoms like, tension in the neck, or, grinding the teeth, or headaches, or backaches, or stomach aches, not to mention, sweaty palms and sweaty armpits.
Or maybe not being able to sleep.
Yeah.
Is that another?
Yeah. Insomnia, food, whether we can eat or not eat, changes in whether we can sleep or eat. Even just our executive functioning. I talked about the 3 floors of the elevator. The 3rd floor, if we can ever get there, is that executive function place where we can plan and strategize and organize, and where we get our traction to move forward. And when people are at this chronic limbic fight, flight, or freeze place, they can't get enough traction to get access to that.
Yeah. That's helpful. So if anyone is experiencing these kinds of stressors, whether or manifestations of anxiety and stress, whether it's tension in the neck or in shoulders or insomnia,
tightness in the chest,
then you, if you can name the source, how important is it to name the source of the anxiety? And again, we're using anxiety and stress synonymously. So how important is it to name the source when we're talking about this?
Yeah. In therapy, we'll often say, name it to tame it. If I can name it, I may be able to tame it. If I understand it, and I understand its subtleties and how it builds, I can cut it off at the pass. And so even naming it in the sense of being able to delineate between yourself and anxiety. Being able to say, this is Steve and this is anxiety.
Right.
To make it almost a separate entity to yourself.
So for some people that may be kind of weird. Like am I talking to someone? Am I talking to people? Like am I talking to an inanimate object? Like, hey, anxiety over there, you leave me alone. And that could be kind of weird. Like if I got up to preach and I'm feeling anxious, because I get anxious all the time when I speak, and people may not ever know that, but I get anxious. And so that's kind of weird though, if I'm kind of like standing up and, hey, anxiety, leave me alone, I'm about to preach. So
however you want to do it, but, we are sort of training ourselves to be aware of it on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's good. So so people may not normally go to a counselor to manage their anxiety. So what are some normal ways, or what are some ways in which people attempt to manage anxiety? How do they attempt to do it when, and it could be some of those ways could be like not helpful, but what are some ways in which people attempt to manage anxiety?
Oh, there are lots of ways. Lots of positives, lots of negatives. Obviously, a negative would be substance abuse. I used to work in a community mental health setting when people would be out on their smoke break, and I thought, I think they just need to deep breathe. But that's what they were doing. They were breathing deeply, but they were just putting smoke in there. So some of the things that people do to deal with their anxiety actually exacerbate their anxiety. Like the nature of obsessive compulsive disorder, for instance, is you ruminate and you obsess on something, and you have to do something ritualistically to assuage that, but it never really works, and you're kind of caught, in a trap. And so, but then, there are a lot of things. This year, people had a lot of things that they had in the mix that they would normally do that you function just fine. Like if they were real extrovert and they like to get together with people and play volleyball and whatever. Yeah. There's not a lot of that going on, and so.
And that could heighten their anxiety?
Yeah, because the tools that we had to use, some of them are just not available to us. And if they were our primary tools, we may not know what to do. And there can be a point of diminishing returns where we, in that nebulous place, never really land anywhere. And so, it takes some creative energy. And, that's one of the roles that I can play as a therapist, is just to help broaden people's ideas of what they can do to manage themselves.
Yeah. That's really good. Hey, friends, we are here, another Better Together conversation. And we're talking about anxiety. We're talking about anxiety. We're with our friend Steve Halsell, who is a licensed professional counselor. And he's kind of walking us through, talking to us a little bit about anxiety, the origin of it, how people typically manage it, but also how we can manage it in a better way. We're going to get to some tools in just a bit, but we're just kind of scratching the surface on what is anxiety, what are the manifestations of anxiety, some of the physiological manifestations of it, and having a really, really good conversation with him regarding anxiety. We are dealing with all kinds of things that make us anxious, and I couldn't think of a better time to talk about this right in the middle of not only Corona but also the holiday season to talk about this. So we're here again talking about anxiety. This is a quote by Viktor Frankl, and Viktor Frankl talks a lot about hope and knowing your why. And so he said, between stimulus and response, there is space. In the space, there is the power to choose our response.
Mm-hmm.
In that response lies our growth and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So, so when a person is they've been stimulated in terms of to be anxious. So some people may not know how to have a positive response in that space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So talk to us a little bit about how we can begin to recognize the space, and what can we begin to put in the space once we're stimulated with anxiety.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl, of course, was a psychiatrist, and probably a seasoned psychiatrist when he ended up in a concentration camp, and later writes Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And I, on one hand, I'd say we have a choice always, and at some points we hit a point of diminishing returns where our car is in the snowdrift, and putting the pedal to the metal probably isn't going to get us anywhere. I do meet people at points where they've lost the ability to make that choice in that situation, and we have to walk them through with breathing exercises and things. I mean, I've literally sometimes had to walk out to the parking lot and walk a kid down, and then walk him around the parking lot so he could get calm.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to start with just physiology, because in psychology, sometimes scientists would debate psychologists on this sort of thing, but we think of the mind and the brain, and sometimes we have to use our mind to trick our brain. And for me, getting people to breathe, I help them visualize they're going from that second floor of that fight, flight, or freeze, and we're kind of putting hydraulic fluid in the elevator to get it to the third floor by getting this deep breathing to happen.
Yeah.
Slow, because the brain they'll pick up the protocol and go, whoa, hey, we're getting signals for calm. All right, let's push these buttons, and their heart rate can slow down, and their breathing can get deeper, and they can get to a calm place. And I'll also have people do bilateral movement. A lot of times when people get anxious, they pace around, right?
Okay.
Well, that's actually a mechanism for helping them to calm down, because if you can picture it, it's like the brain gets kind of hijacked, and we're trying to get the whole brain back on board. So and you could do that by marching, going up in stairs a few times, but even like, say, if you're at a desk or you're in your bed, you can still tap a finger on each hand, you can blink each eye, we're trying to get the brain on board, and we're getting the breathing to calm us down. And so sometimes we just have to draw on tools like that just to get at the ground level.
Sure.
I mean, sometimes people are coming to therapy, it's evident that they're kind of behind the eight ball. They're kind of they may need medication even just to get enough traction to make use of what we're trying to do in therapy.
Sure.
And Viktor Frankl, he watched people all around him lose their minds,
Mm-hmm.
because he was in a death camp.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was easier for him because he was a psychiatrist, but I think he had a certain amount of tools that helped him to function through that a lot of those people didn't.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. This is so important. You mentioned Viktor Frankl being in the concentration camp and people just kind of losing it mentally and emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we need this right now because there are people, and again I come back to coronavirus because this is the context that we're in, and there are people who have just like, I am tired of this,
Mm-hmm.
and I am cooped up in the house, for for long periods of time. I can't do the things that I used to do.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is nowhere near a concentration camp,
Mm-hmm.
but I can understand the kind of the mental part and the emotional part
Mm-hmm.
just being kind of worn down like a slow drip on the rock that erodes the rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
That,
Mm-hmm.
and if we don't do something different, if we don't fill the space
Mm-hmm.
with something, we won't have the growth and freedom. So
Yeah.
so I really like just that image and your metaphors of getting to the executive function of the brain to say, all right, so what can we do differently?
Mm-hmm.
So here's another question that's kind of a antithesis of that. If we don't get to the executive function of the brain, what are the risks? What are the risk factors
Mm-hmm.
if we just simply do not address stress and anxiety?
Mm-hmm. Somebody pointed out to me some time ago that if you look at the CDC, what people die of, ultimately, what people die of, and you look around the world, and maybe some of this was WHO and some of it was CDC, but obviously we're not dying a lot of polio or smallpox or any number of things here. But if you really look at a lot of the things that we die of, people say that we can really trace a lot of that to stress, to chronic stress, and maybe some would also say inflammation that goes with that stress,
Yeah.
And that's would be a sad commentary on the way that we function as a society, even when we are functioning in our norm in this culture. I mean, we are functioning in a different way than most cultures function in the world.
Yeah.
We don't have a siesta.
Yeah, that's right.
We.
I could use that.
Me too, man.
That's that bed is over there. So
Yeah.
I took a nap earlier. So
We have to draw straws or something. But anyway, we live in a different way than most people do, and it's been kind of refreshing. And I try not to lead people and to come up with a positive or a negative thing about this quarantine. I just say, hey, how's what's been the positive, what's been the negative, what's the best, the worst, and a lot of people have been saying, our life was so busy.
Yeah.
We were carting our kids around to practices, and we were, we just, it was nonstop. And it was such an abrupt change for us at first. Like, wow, maybe we almost kind of needed it to be that way.
Yeah.
Maybe in our American way of thinking, it's like, well, it's almost a badge of identity, but when they really slowed it down,
Yeah.
I feel like they're all sitting around the RV on the camp. It's like maybe we can just play cards and enjoy each other.
Right.
I mean, a part of managing our stress is just basic self-care. I mean, and sometimes I think we separate what's spiritual and what's not spiritual. Like sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is take a nap.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of scripture talking about Sabbath and Jubilee laws. And like, even
I was really spiritual today.
I know. Yeah, exactly. I want to be more spiritual.
So let me ask. So this is a good segue. Friends, we are here with Steve Halsell, and we're talking about stress and anxiety. This is another Better Together conversation. If you're just joining us, we're so grateful that you've joined us, and we're kind of moving into a kind of a second half of the conversation about Christians and psychology, Christians and therapy, and there's a fight between the two, an age-old fight that goes way back, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. If you have a question, drop it in the chat, and we're going to get to the questions in just a bit. And I think a lot of questions have been coming in, and so again, thank you for joining us. So Steve, this has been an age-old fight.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an incompatibility between Christianity and psychology? We're talking about emotions. We're talking about anxiety. We're talking about really the psychology of a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And there are individuals who would say, "Wait a minute, like I'm a Christian. I have faith, and I have prayer, and I have God. I don't need a therapist. I don't need a counselor." And listen, no disparaging remarks against you as a counselor, but there are people out there like, I don't need Steve. Like how do you respond to individuals who say, like, I have God, I have prayer, I have the Bible, I don't need a counselor?
Well, for one, I think that belies our culture in that we do think very individually in that way. Even the way that we read scripture, we bleed into it our own culture. Like, it's just me and Jesus, or me and my Bible, me and my prayer life, and some people are, I don't even need church. I don't need a pastor. I go out in my kayak and pray, and I'm fine. Um, but that's not the biblical witness. That's not the biblical community's way of thinking about things. When we come across the word "you" in the Bible, it's usually, if not always, plural.
That's right.
I mean, if we're going to talk to an individual, we name them Paul, or Peter. We don't. We're talking to the Corinthians. We're talking to the Jews. We're talking to this particular family.
Yeah.
It's assumed in culture that we are that we need each other. I think there's so much polarity in our culture about whether we're independent or dependent, and we don't have to make that polarity, because really we are a community of interdependent people.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I love that. That is, I love, in our earlier conversation, talked about this collective anxiety that we have. That there's a collective anxiety that we have going through this coronavirus season. There should be a collective community, how we deal with it and how we walk together through these times. Yeah. And so there is this level of compatibility between Christianity and psychology.
And I'm not going to win everybody over on that idea. I mean, I understand people's ambivalence about it. It's really just a body of knowledge that we've researched over a couple hundred years or so of what we've learned about how people function and why they function and how they get this way. And it's morphed over time. We used to have very deterministic ideas about how people are and how they develop and how they, maybe they're stuck that way for the rest of their life. We've changed over time. We've learned about neuroplasticity and things, and that's a hopeful thing. I don't see it as a competing, paradigm for life. I see it as, in my role, I work with people of every stripe. I've blue collar Pentecostal people to Russian Orthodox people. In a given day, and of course atheists and agnostics as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make a connection with all those people, and of course I'll let the Russian Orthodox guy lead the prayer. I'm not, I don't have to pigeonhole people or get them in my camp or anything like that.
Right.
But what I am interested in is how their mental health dictates their theology to a degree. Yeah. I am interested in the culture and how it dictates their theology to a degree, because that does have huge implications. And I think back to my own story with mental health. I was always a very reflective guy, very pensive, contemplative. There's lots of words for that, but basically I was the deep guy who, maybe a little weird, always had a journal and stack of books and a backpack. And,
right.
I was would-be monk sort of guy.
Yeah. I always thought you were that.
Yeah, something like that. Beatboxing monk or something.
Yeah. Like that. Nice.
But anyway, and the class clown. Somehow I don't know how those all work together, but anyway, that actually, in some way, when my mental health began to decline, worked against me. that image of, putting the pedal to the metal when you're in the snowdrift.
Yeah.
I tried to do more prayer, and I tried to do more Bible reading, and I tried to do more service, and I got deeper and deeper, and I kind of felt like maybe God will release me if I would figure out whatever this is,
Right.
and
Right.
then I can just, I was maybe too spiritual in a sense to be open to other ways that He wanted to reach me.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I landed in a adult children of alcoholics meeting, learned a lot about myself,
Yeah.
became more open to counseling, got help there, even for a time tried medication to get, my head above the water. And so I understand the gatekeepers that, are really ambivalent about these kinds of things, because I was that guy, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily ahead of them or better than them or whatever. I changed my mind, and I think that's one of the words for repentance, right? Is that we change our mind.
Yeah.
I became more open, and I realized that it's my responsibility to understand the way I function and why I function and how that affects other people.
Yeah.
And it was my job to do something about that.
So why is there such a stigma?
Hmm.
Like where I grew up, and again, just like we in our neighborhood, we just, African Americans in my neighborhood, we just did not talk about counseling. We did not talk about therapy, and we had the neighborhood counselor, right? We had someone on our block who would give us wisdom, grandma.
Yeah.
So there was this sense that I don't need a counselor. That means, and please hear me when I say this. These are the pejorative terms that were used in our day. If you go see a counselor, that means you're crazy, and that's again a pejorative term. So there was a stigma associated with seeing a therapist, seeing a counselor.
Yeah, definitely.
So and again, I know that's not just in an African American community.
Right.
That's literally all over. So why is there such a stigma to go see a counselor when you have problems?
In general, I think there's a stigma to anything we don't understand. I mean, anything that we don't understand, we're afraid of. And if that thing that could reflect on me in some bad way or something that I don't want to explore that I'm also afraid of, I mean, that's a perfect cocktail for avoiding that. I mean, we have a long human history of marginalizing people for things we don't understand.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I mean, we only understand people by what we observe, and we only understand them by the lens that we already have, and we already understand them by the narrative that builds when we have a continual interaction with this person that affects us in a certain way. That doesn't necessarily mean that we understand them, even if we've lived with them for years. And so when I think about in history how we dealt with the lepers, I mean, I could forgive that early community that they didn't understand. They were afraid of something they didn't understand. They distanced themselves. They were, that mechanism of survival was like, hey, I don't know what this is, but I don't want it. I don't want my kids to have it, and you guys need to go somewhere, right? And so, we thought it was a skin disease. It's actually a nerve disease. We thought it was contagious, not so much. We thought it was a curse. I mean, this is a day and age where our only assumption was if something's wrong with you, blind, deaf, whatever.
Right.
That's, who am I to tip the apple cart? God, that God obviously had that for you. Like, you must have deserved that. I mean, you see when Jesus is healing people, the disciples themselves are like, hey, aren't they born this way? Like, did they do this in utero? Like, parents do, like, are pretty erroneous ideas that did a lot of damage to people. And so here we are, thousands of years later, we're talking to a guy to specialize about anxiety, even though in this day and age, 2 seconds on Google, you can learn more and you're going to learn in this talk. We have the information. There's a kind of ignorance that, or we just don't have the information. And there's a kind of ignorance where you go, I don't know what to do with that. And I'm putting it over here. The problem is that we have these problems, and other people we care about have these problems.
That is so we see this, and I would dare say that in the church today, and you've just hinted on it, in the church today, we've treated individuals with mental health issues or anxiety disorder as kind of, or at least a class of lepers, in our culture.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that something is wrong with that person, so they're not normal, so they can't serve. They're not normal, and they can't do this thing that we're asking them to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate that we treated people in that way.
Yeah.
So
We not only marginalize them, but because we're uncertain about it, we also fill in the blanks with our own assumptions. And then we do damage because, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. I mean, the unfortunate thing in this day and age, we have such a vernacular for mental health. I mean, if somebody washes their hands, oh, you OCD, if somebody's not paying attention, hey, ADHD, come on over here.
right.
I mean, we have kind of a pejorative and even a contemptuous association with, we can call it out, but we're not necessarily helping anybody with it.
Yeah.
We know enough to hurt.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Hey, we're with Steve Halsell, a licensed professional counselor, psychotherapist, and our very own. He's a member of Trinity Church, and we're talking about anxiety and stress. We're using those terms synonymously, and how to manage it. And we're just talking about now how is Christianity and psychology compatible? And we say, yes, there is. Again, psychology and counseling doesn't replace my faith. It does supplement my faith. And so I'm going to give I'm going to give you kind of rapid fire some myths, and then give you an opportunity to debunk those myths. All right. So here's the first one.
I'll try not to make any mistakes.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's a really, really bad dad
That's
joke.
late.
All right, so I liked it better when you beatbox. All right, so if the Lord is my strength, I can't be weak.
Well, I mean, I think about even scriptures that speak to that. God chose the weak to shame the strong. It says, my grace is sufficient for you because my power is made perfect in
weakness.
I mean, it's like part of our resume, really, to be weak.
I mean,
that. I haven't found anybody in scripture that doesn't have weakness on their resume.
Yeah.
And you could even say, and this might sound sacrilegious, but here's Jesus sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah.
And he's, I like what Lincoln had to say. He said, courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite our fear.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's another definition for faith as well. We don't see the end, but we step forward nonetheless.
Okay, myth debunked. All right, there we go. Here's another one. I need to have it all together, and this is kind of another one, kind of connected to the first one. I need to have it all together. I can't show weakness. Mm-hmm. And again, I think we kind of answered that one.
Similar already. Idea, yeah.
So again, we have.
Please help me because I haven't got it together. So.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason you're here. You're in my office. I'm trying to help you, but you're resisting the help. So no, I'm just kidding. So again, for me, I don't want to manage an image. For a long time, I managed an image. I wanted to try to prove to everyone I had it together, and the interesting thing is, everybody knew that I didn't, and I was the only one who didn't know, or at least who wasn't admitting that I didn't have it all together. And even my management of an image was actually causing me anxiety. Yeah. And so with that, I mean, how people try
it takes
to
up a lot of mental space for sure.
Try to manage an image, presenting a false self.
And people ask me, like, how do you deal with such maybe a stressful or painful environment all day with people like this? I think part of it is that I'm comfortable in my own skin. And people can be at ease with you when you're comfortable in your own skin, and they can be comfortable with themselves in your presence.
Yeah, very good, very good. All right, here's another one. It's going to hurt more dealing with my past than to ignore and move forward.
Yeah, there's always going to be pain involved in moving forward with our lives. We get help when we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. When the pain of working through it is lesser than the pain of staying with it. And pain. I wish I could tell people that healing doesn't hurt, but it does.
Yeah.
And
I like that.
but I can be their trusted ally in that healing work.
So man, that if you're here and you're saying, man, I don't want to deal with the past. You're watching. I don't want to deal with the past because the past is going to hurt. That's such a good word, that healing does hurt. In order to deal with our past, we actually have to face it, and so it really is a myth that dealing with my past is going to hurt more than ignoring it or moving forward. So, all right, that's really good. Here's another one. If I just pray harder, my stress and my problems will go away.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I spoke to that. I mean, you know, I had a few tools in my bag that I knew how to use, and I didn't have other tools. I needed my community too, because I found that and this is true of most people, when they get into a lot of pain, they isolate. You know, when you're isolating in pain, and you think, oh, it's just me and Jesus and me and prayer, and you know, that's not what the biblical community did. They were they helped each other. They were there for each other, and I had a tendency to, I think maybe, knowing enough about my past, was I had a lot of contempt for my own need growing up in an environment where there was so much need, and I had to learn to be emotionally independent from a very early age, and so it was my nature to be a lone wolf, and that didn't serve me well, and so when I try to get people into recovery, I present to them that they should go to a group, and they're always like, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to talk about all the things I'm most embarrassed about and are painful in my life to other people I don't know, and I'm going to listen to them talk about all the painful things. Not so much.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you isolating in your pain is going to exacerbate this problem.
And it's going to be worse.
You need a community to get where you need to go.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Yeah. All right. So I can, again, this is another, you just kind of talked a little bit about it but I'm going to say it anyway. I can just talk to my small group. I mean, I got some really, amazing people who care about me, or I can just talk to my pastor and about my problems.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that, everybody has to go to psychotherapy. That's, I don't try to be the one-stop shop for everybody either. I mean, I am trying to encourage people to be plugged into as many things as they possibly can.
Yeah.
Celebrate recovery, divorce care, going to church, whatever. And if that serves them well and they can be in a functional level and they can get where they need to go, hey, power to you. I mean, the last thing I want to do is invalidate people's ability to move forward with their life by thinking they absolutely need me. I don't want to do that.
That could be another addiction, again, where there's a sense of soul dependence on a person. Again, you're saying get plugged into a number of different places, enough to to function, move forward, and not become abnormally dependent on an individual.
But I do think that there is a specific role that I can play.
Absolutely.
That is unique to those other roles.
Absolutely.
And just as your role is unique to them. I mean, at best, I'm an augmentation of what you do spiritually in their lives, And so we all play a role, and I spread the net as wide as I can to get them where they need to go. If they haven't tried psychotherapy, I mean, sometimes I wish I could give people take two and call me in the morning. Here's what it feels like to be in shape for a year. Here's what it feels like to have have a deep spiritual life. Here's what if I could just give people a reference point and they would know what they were working toward. It's sort of nebulous, like they've never done this therapy thing before. You don't see the out date. They don't know when what it's going to be like. I get that, but I just want to encourage people to try it out. And not necessarily with me. I mean, I'm full, really. But I want them to. There's something unique that they can get it, and if you don't know what it is, talk to other people that that have benefited from counseling.
Absolutely, I love that. All right, so counseling is only for serious problems.
Well, and unfortunately, that perpetuates the stigma, right?
Yeah.
That you have to be crazy. I mean. I'm usually working behind the 8 ball. Like, the floors are usually falling through by the time people show up. I guess we need to be in counseling now. Like, well, yeah, I think so. And it doesn't have to be that way, because many of us go to the dentist every 6 months. We go to get our oil changed every 3, 4, 5,000 miles, right? Like there should be a sense of part of my self-care is dealing with me, and that's my responsibility, And so if we can get to that place where we can make it kind of normative to do that type of self-care, maybe we could change the shape of that.
That's really
we
good.
wouldn't have to get to that place.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
All right, so here's another one. There's nothing I can do about my past.
I think there is. Obviously, we can't change the events, or even necessarily change the impact that they had on us to this point. But I do think that we can reframe our past.
Yeah.
And I do think that we can not necessarily be a victim of our past. We can learn to make choices. I mean, the sad thing, and we've all watched this happen, is that problems that follow one generation follow the next generation, follow the next generation. Somebody, they grew up in a domestic violence home, and then they get in a domestic violence relationship, and it just carries on. And we have to, it's not our fault, that momentum that got us to where, but somebody has got to pivot on their heel and say, I don't want to be part of this mess anymore. What do I need to do? It's a scary place to begin, but we don't want to continue that reverberation through the generations.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
So let's turn the corner just a little bit. You talk about the idiot lights of the soul. You didn't call me an idiot, but
right.
I thought you did. So we're checking the idiot lights of the soul. How do we begin to do that, and how do we begin to know that we have an anxious presence? We're kind of moving into before we jump to the questions, I think we have a lot of questions. We're kind of looking at the tools. How do we begin to manage? What do I need to do to begin to check the engine lights, if you will, in my mind, in my soul?
Yeah. The first thing is always awareness. We can't change anything until we become aware of it. Yeah. And we can't change anything that we become aware of until we can really name what it is. And we're not the first person in the world to have anxiety or depression, these things have been around for a really long time. There's a body of knowledge. There's plenty of our information available to us. If people were to go to psychcentral.com, there's all kinds of tests people could take. There's nobody who's taken more tests on themselves than a psychotherapist. Okay, but don't overdo it. But if you're thinking you might have some of these symptoms that we talked about earlier in the talk, it'd be worth it to explore. Awareness is the first step, and the thing is, what I've seen happen with people is when they become aware, they have a lens for it in their family. Like, hey, my mom's kind of a hoarder, or hey, that's kind of indicative of I work with clients, and they work on themselves for a while, and then they go to be with family, and they're like, wow, that's where this came from. It's like it's in there, man. It's in there.
You got me thinking now. I'm thinking like, that's why.
Yeah, operational hazard of being psychotherapist.
So let me ask, and before we jump to the questions, what are some, and because I think we're going to get to this in the questions as well. What are some tools and life-giving activities that, particularly in this season, that we can begin to do and embrace to begin to manage stress and anxiety?
One of those things is just to pick up things that used to work for us. The things that are still available to us. I try to, with clients, I try to piggyback on things that have worked for them instead of trying to figure it out. Let's work with what they've got and then piggyback on that. And so if you have, exercise would be one of those things. I mean, most of my friends know me as somebody who's been pretty fit for a while. And I had a gym membership with the same guy for 8 years. And, we hit it 3-4 times a week, and I was running 5Ks, and I was doing lifting and all this stuff. But when this coronavirus quarantine happened and the gym shut down, I had no idea how much those structures, that I'd come to rely on those structures to make it work, So they didn't have a specific day and a time and a place and a person to do it with. And so, I know that I need to get back into, I pulled out my elliptical recently, and I'm going back on my elliptical because I'm in I have to deal with the shoulder right now, and I can't do push-ups and stuff like that. But I've had to change it up. I just have to change it up. Things that I used to do that worked well for me, let's start there. Things that we know we can do, have done, have worked for us. That's the first place to start.
Yeah, that's really good. It's really good. So we're here with Steve Halsell talking about anxiety, managing it, particularly in this season. And we've kind of run the gamut from him beatboxing to talking about the origin of anxiety, as well as some tools. We're going to get into some questions now, and we'll return to some other tools as well, and then we'll have some closing thoughts, and we'll let you go for tonight. But here's some questions that came in. So the first one is, what does a mom who's home with all 4 children do for a break in wearing daily?
Are we talking about a single mom, or are we talking about
Well, it just says a mom who's home, and I don't think this is a text from your wife or
right? Yeah, she's like,
a question from
when are you
your
coming
wife.
home? Will you get him?
I'll get him home soon, Kristen.
Okay.
All right. So what does a mom do who she's home with, all 4 children, and what does she do for a break? I mean, I can imagine she's wearing thin.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is a single mom or a married mom, but naps are important, and even have naps or quiet times for the kids where there's an activity. I know a lot of parents are feeling like right now, like, gosh, I have my kids on screens all day. Like, we don't run out of things to do but put them on screens. But like, hey, if that's what it takes to get a nap, then I recommend having people having filters and things like that. Specific movies that the kids can watch. But a nap is what the doctor ordered.
Yeah.
I would say also activities for the kids that can occupy their full attention to give you a break. This isn't always a break, but sometimes you can involve kids in certain things, and certain kids will really want to participate in those things.
Like helping to cook or something like that. So.
Yeah, you can make teachable moments out of it.
Yeah.
But I think that it also is important that we model for them how to deal with our stress.
Yeah.
That we can talk about it as a family.
Yeah.
And so obviously we need some breaks. We need a variety of other activities. We could do exercise with the kids.
Yeah.
My wife I was a gym member, but she had videos that she did at home, and the kids can participate and do those workouts together. Going for my wife's taken a number of stroller rides through the neighborhood, and you can get some vitamin D and take some deep breaths, and that could be another opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I would even add to that, and we've been, Steve has talked about community a lot in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
This is so important for to either be involved in a small group or to be involved in a community in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
These are times where, if you're comfortable, you can call a friend over. Hey, can you watch the kids
Mm-hmm.
for 30 minutes while I get a break?
Yeah.
Hey, can you just let me come over to your house and take a nap while you watch the kids? Or so community. We talk about community all the time at Trinity, and I know we talk about it, but man, we want to be about it. And this is an opportunity to say, I need my community. I need the family of God in this season. So going it alone, it was never God's purpose for us. All right. So hope that helps.
Yeah. Hope it wasn't too simplistic. I mean.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Probably nothing you haven't thought of, and I don't want to sound simplistic. There's a lot cover there.
So here's another one. Any tips for dealing with anxiety or panic attacks besides breathing, counting, breathing breathing or counting? It's appreciated. I have a disorder, but it obviously has more triggers this year.
Mm-hmm.
So any tips for dealing with anxiety and panic attacks besides breathing?
Yeah, I recommend you keep breathing. You
It's
know,
good.
but yeah, even exercise. You know, exercise actually raises our threshold for stress, as well as lowers our stress, and a lot of those neurochemicals that are really only meant to be emitted during times of emergency, break the glass in case of emergency, they're not really good to be sitting around in our bodies. They need to be expelled from our bodies. And so heavy breathing as part of exercising, because you're huffing and puffing, you're doing some cardio, sweating, we can actually get rid of some of the toxicity that holds to our bodies that can also perpetuate that. So if you can try to do some exercise, even just brisk walking, especially when you feel like it's coming on, because you can sort of redirect yourself. Another tool, and speaking of redirecting, would be a distraction. Now, we're in a day and age where our phones are distracting and our computers, and that's not the kind of distraction I'm necessarily talking about. I'm talking about doing something that requires your full attention.
Yeah.
Something. I mean, you don't want to be sewing while you're watching TV. That's not a good idea, right? I mean, something you need to concentrate on. I mean, this may not appeal to you, but one of the things I do for myself is I actually play myself in a game of chess. I mean, I always win that way. Sometimes you just need a win. But
you're funny.
But,
all right.
yeah, I mean, it focuses me because it's a thinking game. And so if you can find some activities that you used to do or are even doing currently, that might be a way of redirecting yourself. Another tool is sometimes we can sort of step out of our anxiety simply by describing it. We can write a description of our anxiety. We can use metaphors. We can use heavy. We can describe it, and we can also observe it. We can observe just to get a sense. It doesn't have to be our enemy. It can be something that we're learning about ourselves. We're really afraid of when we're healthy. We know what we want. We know what we need. We know what we feel, and we're able to communicate those to other people, and see those needs met. And getting healthy is self-care. And so anything that you can do to redirect yourself, anything you can do to self-soothe yourself. I mean, sometimes you might just need a hot bath, and some good smelling candles.
Yeah.
So those are a few things. There's plenty more.
Yeah, that's really good. I journal. Been journaling off and on for quite some time, and in my journal, I describe moments when I've been anxious, whether it's an interaction or an email. I describe that, or even an anxious interaction. There's something an author by the name of Steve Halsell in his book Managing Leadership Anxiety. He talks about a verbatim, and when you were involved in an anxious interaction, step out of that and try to describe the anxious moment verbatim. Write it down. This is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened. And most people say, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't remember." When I've been anxious, it's amazing how much I'm able to remember and actually record and write down. So I really like that. I like the again, the distraction. I would love to see you play yourself in chess. When the Mac was open, one of the things that I loved to do was the steam room in the sauna. And when I felt anxious, that was an opportunity for me to kind of release some of that. So
one of my mentors said to me, "Write down your fears; they'll take on their proper size."
I like that.
I have this many journals on a shelf.
Yeah. So here's another. Um, what are some specific actions, and maybe you've already touched on this, but maybe you have some more. What are some specific actions I can take when overwhelmed with anxiety?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think some of those things we talked about earlier about um, getting grounded with our breathing, and even getting up and moving around. Those can be ways that we can just get enough traction. And of course, I want to encourage people. I don't prescribe medication, but sometimes medication can be something that keep our head just above water enough that we can at least see where we're swimming to. And and most of the time when people are given medication for anxiety, the doctor says as needed. And it's interesting how that's just that safety net of feeling like, okay, it's there, but most of the time people don't even use it. Sometimes I think wish my clients would use it more often because they get to that place, or like
Sure,
their
sure.
relationship to it is always the extreme, and where I want them to get more of a preventative maintenance.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I want to encourage people to talk to their doctors about their symptoms, and explore that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good. So, is keeping a sense of humor a good antidote for dealing with anxious care?
Well, if you've ever been my client, we've laughed. I mean, we do that. I do that a lot. And when I was in grad school, I was actually kind of the secret class clown, because the guy who transferred out of my program to go on to another program, they all told him that he was the life of the party, and he said, "Well, I have a confession to make. Steve's been feeding me all the punchlines." so, so I had to be the life of the party. I was too polite to interrupt the professor, but humor, man. One of my professors said to me, he said, "Steve, don't ever lose that."
Yeah.
He said, "People burn out in this all the time. You
Yeah.
know." He said that will be your saving grace.
Yeah.
You need to keep a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a very fine line. I don't want to make fun of anybody.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
My clients that we've been working together for a little while, we have a little bit of a bantering relationship, and
Yeah.
I can be a little facetious and even a little sarcastic, because I think sometimes the element of surprise can bring about catharsis, can
Yeah.
get people to laugh and surprise themselves that
Yeah.
they can laugh.
In fact, that they can laugh again. Some may think that I don't think I'll ever be able to laugh again. And then for you to say something, invite them into something in a surprising way, and they laugh, I would imagine a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety kind of falls. So at least they begin to see, wow, maybe I was anxious, and now, in fact, I'm able to laugh,
Yeah.
and that feels good.
Yeah, I became such an intense person in depression, and I was such a fun person before it. And so getting back, I came back to me when I had a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Murray Bowen, family systems theory guy, talks about an anxious presence and reactivity. His disciple Edwin Friedman, he wrote a book called um, A Failure of Nerve, and Friedman says the first thing to go in an anxious system is playfulness.
Mm.
And so I love
We need
this.
play for sure.
Yeah, I love this question, and I love your answer. Um, so um, so I've heard a sermon that anxiety is sinful. Is that true?
Mm. Mm. You know, so let me talk a little bit about sin. Sin is sin voluntary or involuntary? Yes. Is sin individual or is it systemic? Yes. I mean, um, yes. I mean, I think we could say anxiety. Um, I think it becomes sin at the point where I know what I need to do. You know, People coming into therapy, I'm trying to equip them with what they need to know to manage their anxiety. When we don't care for ourselves in the way that God cares for us, we sin.
Hmm.
And maybe that's a different way of thinking about it. We always think about sin as like I'm bad and God is therefore disappointed with me. Uh, that's not the heart of a parent. The heart of a parent is like, I hate to see you hurt. Please, let's change this. I hate to see you suffer. uh, in my work with people, I'm like, how do we get them out of suffering? How do we get them out of suffering? How do we get? I don't have to browbeat anybody, you know. I we both can agree somewhere down inside that we want that they want to be well. They may have a lot of barriers to getting there, but I don't necessarily see them as bad. I see them as not knowing how to do it, and they need my discipling instruction to get there. And so if sin means that I'm bad and God's stomping his foot and crossing his arms and raising his eyebrow and yelling at me, I think that our mental health can dictate that kind of image.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a redeemed image of what it is. This is about care.
Yeah.
I am learning how to love myself the way I'm loved.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's really good. And again, I know the scripture says anything that's not of faith is sin. And when we are we're allowing anxiety and stress to cloud our image of God and to make God so opaque, or maybe even say, I like my life is, I'm willfully eating the fruit of stress and anxiety, and where I'm not trusting and faithing in God, then I think we create moments of suffering, and I do think we end up crossing the line into sin. Again, not we're not talking about you being a bad person, but you're saying that even God can't help me in this moment. And part of my faithing is I'm going to trust a counselor. I'm going to trust my community. I'm going to trust the scripture. Again, it's not a replacement of our faith. It's a supplement. Counseling is a supplement. And when I reject the help that God has for me, then I do think we start marching in the marshes of sin. So, which
is another way of saying into our own self-destruction. Right.
So, very good. So, here's we have a couple of more questions. How does a mom who's virtual schooling, husband working long hours, get time for themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thought is it necessary? Absolutely. And so it is a problem we need to solve, and it's not an easy problem to solve, but it is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And so if something is absolutely necessary, and we pull our resources, we figure out, we ask for help. I mean, that's one thing we don't do very easily. We don't ask for help, especially when we get to a shame place.
Yeah.
But we do need to ask for help. We have a community of people that can help us, and we have to create rhythms in our life that allow for the rest that we need. And so that's kind of a broad answer to that, but kind of the same answer to people need psychotherapy. People will say, well, I can't afford psychotherapy. Like, well, it can be expensive, but are you worth it? For one, and
that's a really good question.
And is it worth? I mean, isn't it expensive not to do it?
Yeah.
And so we have to figure that out. We have to figure out, like, if it is necessary, then what do we need to do about it? If it is necessary, what do we need to call upon? Where do we need to go?
That is so good. And let me pause right here and just say, kind of drafting off of what Steve just said. You are worth it.
Absolutely.
Let me say that again. You are worth it. You are an image bearer. You're created in the image of God, created from Trinitarian love, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And you are absolutely worth it. So taking care of yourself, practicing self-care is one of the most spiritual things you can do to honor the Father, honor the one who created you in his image. And so, just riffing drafting off of what Steve just said, you are absolutely worth it. And for those of you, again, thank you for your authenticity in the chat. Not all the questions, not all the comments in the chat are necessarily questions, but I understand that you are sharing authentically in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? We thank you for that.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. I think that's the very beginning of some of the healing, when we can actually name it and call it out, and to say, this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm dealing with. And so we absolutely appreciate your authenticity. That's not an easy thing to do, to share what you're going through publicly with someone and with your name on it. It's easy to do it anonymously, but on social media and that sort of thing, is your name is attached to it, right? And so for you to be able to attach your name to saying, yeah, this is what I'm going through, it is huge. And we need the human community. And that's the first step of not going it alone. So thank you for that. We have one more question before we shut it down for tonight. Is it unusual to go to counseling for 40 years like myself? Now, this is thank you for that question. Thank you for being authentic. Thank you for sharing that. And that, yeah, that you took a big risk and a huge risk to ask that question. And I hear just a tad bit of shame there. And I want you to know, no reason to be shamed by that question. I'm not the psychotherapist. I'm going to let the psychotherapist answer that question, but I want to just to pastor just for a moment. The fact that you even asked this question, you took oxygen away from shame, and shame needs secrecy to breathe. And the fact that you actually brought it out in the light, I think is a big deal. So to answer that question,
I love people, and I love that I understand that I'm standing before people who have been through amazing things, and the fact that they're even still standing. Some people, I mean, they should have a standing ovation. People always think that going to therapy means that you must be weak. I mean, like, some of the most courageous people I've ever met are in therapy. I mean, because to deal with your past and to deal with yourself, it takes a heck of a lot of courage. And in a way, when are any of us done with therapy? I mean, I'm unlearning so much, unlearning so much. I have so much to unlearn so that I can learn. And then the gap between what I know and what I'm able to implement, I wish it wasn't as wide as it is.
Yeah.
We have a lifetime to develop, and not all of us have the same trajectory. Not all of us had the same resources. There was a slide in there somewhere about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People have basic needs, then safety needs, and love and belonging. Not all of us had all of those resources or the same trajectory. Not all of us have to face generations of pain and maladaptive coping mechanisms, to use a psychological word. But
explain that, because you just went you went all third floor.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that. But just people are not responding well to their own pain and the pain of other people around them, and having entrenched behaviors that have devastated people. I don't know what this person has been through, but I want you to keep going. I want you to keep unlearning what you have to keep unlearning. I want you to keep learning what you have to keep learning. I want you to keep, when I started running, I don't know if I could even say I like running now, but when I started running, I had to make a decision with myself. Even when I started lifting the same, I can't compare with anybody else. If I compare with anybody else, I'll never get there. Right. And so I had to have very incremental goals for myself that I could measure myself by, so that when I ran the 5K, you know, in a sense, I'm competing against these people, but I already know what my time is, and I want to work at getting at least that time or a little bit better. As long as I am, you know, moving forward from where I am,
That's good.
and I keep moving forward, you know, it doesn't matter who I pass. I have to work on me. It's my job. And I wish I could tell you that as a psychotherapist that I have arrived at enlightenment. I have not, but my clients know that about me. You know, some of the richest people I know in life have really looked long and hard and deep at themselves, and their presence. They're deeply empathic people. They're deeply rich people, and so I don't know you, but all that work means something. You are not the same person. Even though you live so close to yourself, you may think, I don't know if I've even changed. So much has changed, and you have so much to offer the world for all the work that you've done, and I commend you for that.
Yeah. Man, that is so good. You just you went there and reached into somebody's soul to help them be reminded that number one, they're worth it, that they're making progress. Sometimes we can't see it, but they're making progress, and to give them kind of a green light to say, you know, it's okay to keep working on the things that's caused the deep pain or the struggles, and so that's really good. Steve, thank you for
You're welcome.
being with us tonight. Will you come back?
I will.
Again.
I will.
Well, you're actually scheduled to come back because we're going to have Steve back for our January Better Together conversation. We're going to continue talking about this. We're going to talk a little bit more about mental health and what that means for for us as followers of Jesus, but just mental health. Period. We talked a little bit more about taking care of ourselves emotionally. This time, we're going to talk a little bit more about the mental health in January. Listen, thank you for joining us for another episode of our Better Together conversation. I'm your host. Sounded like Medea a little bit, right? I'm your host. No, I'm your host, Marvin Williams, and thank you for joining us tonight. And we're so grateful that you are part of this Better Together conversation. Why? Because, friends, we are better together. Have a great night.